Pitch to Pro is the official podcast of USL Arkansas. This will be our platform to tell our story about the club and the special place that we call home, Northwest Arkansas. This is a journey. We want to bring you along for the ride. We'll share what's going on behind the curtain, help educate the community at large about soccer, our league, and give updates on the progress of the club along the way. Together, we'll explore and unpack our journey to professional soccer, the magic that is NWA, our community, and talk all things soccer from on the pitch to behind the scenes, telling the story of our club. Pitch to Pro podcast is proudly sponsored by podcastvideos.com. Podcastvideos.com is Northwest Arkansas's premier podcast recording studio. Equipped with industry-leading equipment, the recording studio and services save you time, money, and hassle. They are dedicated to helping you create, record, and publish high-quality podcasts for your audience. Be sure to check them out today at podcastvideos.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pitch to Pro podcast. I'm your host, Wes Harris, Managing Director for USL Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas's professional soccer club playing in the United Soccer League. We have a really cool conversation on deck for you today with my very esteemed guest here, Mr. Mervin Jebaraj. Mervin is the director for the Center for Business and Economic Research at the Sam M. Walton College of Business at the University of Arkansas, along with a lot of other things. But man, that's a mouthful. Mervin, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I'm just the man with the longest title.
All good. Well, Mervin, before we get into all of the very interesting stuff that you do, and how that impacts NWA and all of what we're kind of doing here with our project as well, I wondered if you could just, go quickly into a little bit about your background, how you came to NWA. You're, like a lot of us here, transplants, but have come to know and love NWA and now call it home. So talk a little bit about how you found Northwest Arkansas.
So there's a long story and a short story, but the shorter version is that my next door neighbor in Dubai went to school here at the University of Arkansas. And when I was applying to colleges, I applied to a bunch of them, including the University of Arkansas, because I knew somebody that went there. And, sure enough, they gave me a decent chunk of change to go to school here. That brought me here. And over the years, I've come to, find all kinds of things that you can do here in Northwest Arkansas, make it a place that you want to stay in. So I stayed in Northwest Arkansas. So went from Dubai to Fayetteville.
That's quite the move.
Yeah.
That's quite the move. That's awesome. And so talk a little bit about, and you came to the university and did you stay from the university and just that's where you went to work, or did you do a little bit of a few things here or there in between there?
I stayed at the university broadly, at the center in various capacities, eventually running it in 2017. I did do some other things on the side, consulting work and things like that.
Sure.
In general, and staying around the economics field for a long time.
Okay. So talk a little bit about the center and what it does and the work that you guys do.
Yeah, so my center has been around since the 1940s.
Wow.
I have not been there that long, but this was a center. So the university is a land-grant institution, has a mission to serve the entire state. Only two land-grant institutions in the state, us and the University in Pine Bluff. Okay. And, in the 1940s all the way up till the late 90s, what the center did was take data that was collected by the federal government and repackage it for the state and then distribute it to businesses, to government sector, to the state government, local county government, whatever you want. And, basically give them stats about Arkansas that came from the federal government. So this was pre-internet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted data about unemployment or labor force participation or just about anything that you think of, that you can now go to the internet and just find that kind of stuff. All of it was, physically collected, sent, by the federal government, sent to centers like ours around the country, and repackaged them in reports.
Sure.
And mailed them out to people. So with the advent of the internet, we don't need to do that anymore because that data is now resides on federal websites. So we've converted to just doing a lot of analysis and collecting data that isn't collected by the federal government or other sources. So we produce original research on topics that are of interest to Arkansas. So it has to be something to do with Arkansas or a border state that has some businesses in Arkansas necessarily, and with governments, again, state, local businesses and nonprofits to help them answer economic questions, which is our specialty here in the state. So sort of the go-to resource if you want some economic analysis or some question about the economy of our state or public policy change or things like that.
That's great. That's awesome. And you guys just had your 2024, I'm going to butcher this, but 2024 Business Economic Outlook event that you guys hold annually now, and talking about what the outlook looks like for 2024 for NWA and Arkansas abroad. You even went so far as to say the world. You kind of went the funnel. You did the global outlook, the U.S. outlook, and then Arkansas, and then NWA. Can you talk a little bit about some kind of those highlights and summary? Where are we going in 2024?
Yeah, so this was our 30th year to do the Arkansas Business Forecast Luncheon, as it's called.
There you go. The official name.
That's the official name. And, it's been one of those, so if you, you can get global outlooks and national outlooks from a lot of different sources, but you often cannot find local information produced like that. So that was the original impetus behind starting this program. I figured, why just do an Arkansas forecast? You can also have people listen to a perspective on the global economy or the national economy. So we had some great speakers this time. Greg Dayco from EY, who's unfortunately a Manchester City fan.
Unfortunate for both of us.
That's right. Alan Zentner from Morgan Stanley did the national forecast, the state and regional forecast. And I think, across the three of us, the common theme was that no recession in 2024. So,
huzzah.
We also said that last year, and we were right. I don't think people believed us, but...
I was one of them.
Yeah. Believed us?
Believed you. Believed you.
Good.
Believed you, yes. Part of that was I had just done my MBA and went through Raj Kahali's economics class. So
that's right. So, I think last year we predicted a soft landing, and I don't think we ever landed. We're still at cruising altitude. The economy was. We're predicting soft landing again. And, so far the indicators show that the economy is still growing really strong. So we might have undersold the prospects maybe, but we'll see. It's still a lot of the year left.
Yeah.
But that's, the regional and state forecast was basically that, add about 10,000 to 11,000 jobs here in the state, 5,000 to 6,000 jobs here in Northwest Arkansas. Wow. And particularly in the sectors that have been growing a lot recently, like professional technical services, leisure and hospitality, industry, construction.
There's quite a bit
around us. And then education and healthcare services as well.
Yeah, quite a bit, and honestly, not enough in terms of the residential. And I know it's growing, and they're doing what they can, but with what are we up to now? Net 38 new people a day coming to NWA, something like that, with births plus, people moving and all of that, and then
we could do an entire podcast. Probably a few podcasts on why we have built enough housing. But
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. I mean, I think that's great to hear, continued growth and mitigated to what people might have thought of, maybe 2 years ago, even last year. But, I think everybody was kind of coming in like, oh, what's going to happen? What are they going to say? And it was, for some pleasantly surprised, but I think for others it was kind of, oh, okay. Yeah, good.
We like growth.
Yeah, growth is good. Yeah. So speaking of growth, we live in one of the fastest growing parts of the country, the world, but for sure the United States, and not only fast growing, but also, performing well economically on a lot of different metrics and KPIs, increasing diversity, all of these different things. From your perspective, you've been here kind of for that, it's grown since before you were here, but early 2000s to now has kind of been that big boom, in particular over the last 5 to 10. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and kind of, with a little bit of a twist on your professional background as well, in terms of, the economic science behind it a little bit, in terms of what's driving our region's growth? Everybody knows that it's happening now, especially with the national and international attention that we've gotten, but kind of bring people into your world a little bit. What are some of those things that have been the key drivers and how we look at that from your lens?
Yeah, if you think of the original growth boom here in the 90s, that was largely because the three major companies here and the university were growing, particularly the three companies. And so a lot of that growth was those companies doing so well and attracting people to work for them. And then the early 2000s decade, if you will, right up until that recession, was growth that people who wanted to work with those companies were generating. So it wasn't directly, it was somewhat in those companies, but more so in the companies that wanted to work with the three big companies here.
Yeah.
And then in this most recent decade that just passed, is the companies that work with the companies that work with the three big companies. So
the support
companies. Yeah, all the support companies here. And so by and large, Northwest Arkansas's growth has been driven by job growth. So it was either job growth at the three big companies, or the companies that worked for them, or the companies that worked for the companies that worked for them.
Yeah.
But I think we're, not quite there completely yet, but we're starting to get to the self-sustaining growth that isn't dependent on one of these companies adding jobs. At this point, it's, the kind of business growth that you're seeing and the job growth that you're seeing, leisure and hospitality industry, healthcare and education. That's mostly just to sustain the growth in the population here. So it's not directly related to those companies in that sense, except there's all these people here, and all these people need their hair cut, need places to go eat and drink, need places to get their teeth cleaned,
need hospitals, all of that.
Everything of that nature. So that's kind of growth that you're seeing. So it's still sort of in relationship with jobs. But, during the pandemic, we saw some evidence of this with the remote workers. So now it's not, we're not quite there yet. We're not one of those cities where people just move without a job.
Yeah.
And then find something when they get there. So we're not, you go to New York,
right?
Austin or something like that. People just like, I'm just going to move to New York.
Yeah.
Like one of those things.
Right.
I'll
figure it out. Yeah.
And I think there are people that do that here. It's not a very big sector.
Not a norm.
Although certainly over the pandemic with remote working, people were just, I'm just going to move there and figure it out. And you saw a lot of population growth during the pandemic here in Northwest Arkansas. Now, most of these people had jobs somewhere else. So they aren't quite doing the, I'm going to move there, just find a job. But that will be the sort of next phase of our growth, is just become self-sustaining, where you become that region. People go, well, I'm going to go try my luck in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, that's it. That's that next step change. But yeah, I'm going to move to LA and become an actor, but really a waiter or whatever. Or whatever the dream is.
Just, people go to New York to be XYZ, go to Austin to be XYZ. I think those are large self-sustaining population centers now, that the people just move there because they know that's where there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
They fail at the first three things they tried, they'll still have a fourth thing to try.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're not in New York, we're not in LA, we're not in Austin, what are some comp markets that we compare ourselves to, or that you guys, I know you guys, the NWA Council, I know you guys work together on some different projects and things like that. What are some comp markets that kind of we look at, and why do we look at other comp markets and across what metrics?
Yeah, so there's always the why we look at comp markets is because, you want to be able to benchmark yourself against some standard, right? I think originally when we started looking at comp markets, we were thinking of places that were like us in terms of size. So we're a region of 575,000 people, which isn't terribly large. Although I'm sure if you grew up here, it does sound like it's gotten so much larger. But, there are places 1 million people or more. A lot of those places around the country. So
Sure.
we're not that. So we used to compare ourselves to places that more or less were the same size as us.
Mm-hmm.
And we found that over the years that, we 2 to 3 years on a variety of different metrics like job growth, business growth, educational attainment, and things of that nature. We were routinely, ranking ourselves number one compared to places that were just like us. So then we try to be a little more aspirational and pick some larger metro areas that are in our region. So you think of Kansas City or Omaha and places like that, and then we were consistently beating those metro areas too. So we, instead of just patting ourselves on the back and be like, "Oh, look, great," we decided to do something challenging, and so now we pit ourselves against very large metro areas. So Austin, Texas is one of those. Provo in Utah,
It's another
Madison, Wisconsin. The Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle area, and so in Des Moines, Iowa, and say, okay, well, these places are doing a lot better than we are, and they're a lot larger than we are, which has its own built-in advantages. When we talk about self-sustaining growth, they have those. So we want to compare ourselves against them. And obviously, we don't rank nearly as good compared to some of those very large metros, but that's the challenge. We want to see what they're doing, and we want to see how we can do better to get to where they are today.
No, that's great. And I think it's always, my professional background was consumer goods, and started like a lot of people as an analyst, and, learned very early on, it's not just about saying what, it's so what, and then now what. And in order to have a so what and now what, you have to have something to compare it to. And so I think that's good that the region is, that we have our leaders looking at other markets, and not just ones that are maybe similar size, and saying, to your point, pat yourself on the back, but also where do we want to go and who do we want to be? And then, okay, identify the gaps, and then what are some programs or policies or other things that we can do to get there? So that's great. What are maybe one or two things that in the course of your work and time living here, and, you travel around the state quite a bit, what are some things that, people might find interesting that they may not know about either Northwest Arkansas or Arkansas as a state, either economically or otherwise, that you've kind of come across and people routinely find like, oh, I never knew that?
Yeah. I think people in Arkansas know Northwest Arkansas and the growth story that we've had. I think the challenge the region has faced and still does to some extent is that people have an opinion of Arkansas, the state, provincial, backwater, or something like that.
Yeah.
Haven't appreciated all the growth that has happened in Northwest Arkansas and other parts of our state, like Central Arkansas, Northeast Arkansas, Jonesboro. So until they actually come here, they might have an opinion of what that state is like and what amenities we have or probably think we don't have, and what the culture of this place is from the outside. It's colored by sort of a national perception of Arkansas the state, as opposed to these regions that are very different from each other and from the national perception of Arkansas the state. So I think in general, people that come to Northwest Arkansas and other places in Arkansas are generally surprised by what they see here, the level of growth, the openness to all the things that we have growing in our region. And I think it gives them a very different perspective once they're already here. But, we still need to do more work to break that barrier and get past the original psychological not heard anything good about Arkansas.
So. Right. So to that point, I know that we could probably both sit here and talk for days about why we love the area and the region. But you've been here now for just over 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. And, unlike me, I was a boomerang. So I was here for a little bit, moved away for work, not because I wanted to, but for work and family, and came back because we loved it and wanted to be here and raise our family here. But after being here for 20 years, 20 plus, what's, I know you could probably draw on a million things, but what are some of your favorite things about the area? What does it mean for you that you enjoy about living in NWA?
I know while we're recording this today is first fake spring that we have here. What I actually enjoy about one of the things I enjoy. So I grew up in Dubai, which really had just one weather: hot
and very hot.
Not so hot. Yeah. So we have 4 seasons in Northwest Arkansas.
We do.
We have a winter. It's cold. It snows. We have a spring. We have a summer. It gets really hot. And then we have a fall. Fall is really pretty. And I enjoy hiking in particular. There are so many great hikes, both within our cities and really close to our cities. Here in Northwest Arkansas, which you can, hike the same trails at, probably not in the summer, but the other seasons, and enjoy the differences that you can see on the same trails that you've hiked several times. The other thing that I enjoy about Northwest Arkansas is that, you get some of the big city amenities that you might expect to see in much larger metro areas, but we have those types of things here in performing arts space or museum or other cultural assets, music festivals, so on and so forth. A lot of good restaurants, a lot of good bars, a lot of good places where communities can grow together. So
coming soon, professional men's and women's soccer.
Yes, coming soon. There you go.
So, and that's a lot of what we heard too in terms of, we did these listening sessions and what do you love about NWA? I think it was big city amenities without big city problems or mitigated big city problems. So that's great, but I agree with you. The 4 seasons here are definitely marked. But they also do this, especially in the winter. Like this week, I'm not complaining about the weather this week.
This is your first fake spring. We'll have a second fake spring before the real spring.
Yeah. We'll drop back down below 0 here in a couple weeks, maybe. But no, agree. And the hiking, just the outdoors that we have here, and that's so close. It's just incredible. So, but I also know that you are a big football guy. And
correct.
The correct football.
Not hand-ag.
The hand-ag. I love that. So, speaking of ag, we may have some aggro here at the table because Mervin is a Man United fan and I'm a Liverpool fan, and we are arch rivals. Right. But it's okay because I think it's one of the best rivalries in all the sports, and it's just.
I'm a Liverpool fan. I still like him. So.
There you go. Well, there's hope for me. Yeah. So, I wonder, with your background and your professional lens, have you ever kind of looked at or talked about the economics of football? And we don't have to go super granular, but just in terms of how they operate, their business model, have you kind of looked at that at all?
Sort of. I've helped direct one undergraduate honors thesis. We kind of looked at the revenue model of the different, the top 5 leagues. Look at television revenues in particular and see how that was distributed to the teams and what impact that had on competitiveness. So a lot of people are Premier League fans because they have really big TV contracts and agreements with major sports networks all over the world.
They do.
So they've very successfully exported that brand. But what they haven't done, which some of the other leagues like the Spanish League or German League have done, which is taken the money that they have from TV contracts and just given it to the top teams. Whereas in England, you look at 20 teams in the league, they're all fairly competitive. Maybe Luton Town's not as competitive as they might be, but
they're getting up there now. The last few weeks, they've been doing okay.
So you can have a team come into a league from a lower division like Nottingham Forest or whatever and, just do well because of the sheer amount of money and compete against the bigger teams. It's not, every game isn't a complete blowout or a gimme like you might in some of the other European leagues. So that's always very interesting to me.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's not a winner-take-all model. It's definitely, the revenues are definitely handed out evenly. There is a bonus for winning, but it's not significant compared to just payment that goes. And then they also, pay down the pyramid.
They do.
So there's more lower levels of soccer leagues, and that's really where the real community building happens, because the big major clubs that you see now on TV They were community clubs once upon a time, but
Once
now
upon a
they're big international brands more than community clubs, so that you have community clubs
Right.
in those same cities that you have
Exactly.
teams from.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that piece is very interesting. The other thing that I'm sure will be very interesting, and I'm sure we'll all get to live it to some extent, is the World Cup in 2026.
Absolutely.
It's going to be here. I plan to be off for the entire month and a half.
Yeah.
It was originally a month, now it's a month and a half.
Now it's a month and a half because for those that don't know, they extended it from 32 to 48 teams now?
Too many.
Too many, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think they put out a graphic. There's going to be, I think it's 104 games or something like that in total, and like 62 or something like that in 2 weeks, which is almost the entirety of a Premier League season in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, at different
So-
points in my life, I used to pride myself that I could watch every World Cup game.
Uh-huh. Okay. I did that as well. Yep.
It's even if I had the time, I wouldn't be able to. It's just too many games.
I think there are.
Basically, you have to glue yourself in front of the
And potentially multiple TVs. Yeah.
at the same time.
Multi-screening.
Back, when it was a normal World Cup and it had 32 teams,
Yeah.
you'd have 3-4 games a day
3 to 4. Yeah.
and spaced out,
Uh-huh.
so you could actually watch them.
Yeah.
There's like a 1-2 hour break between games.
Yep.
Go do some work, come back,
Yeah.
and watch the next game. Go do some work. Now you can't watch all the teams.
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge, because I too used to pride myself, and have up until even this last Women's World Cup. I watched every minute of every game, and still remember, the 02 World Cup in Korea, and waking up at 1 in the morning,
Right.
and it was like 1, 3, and 5, and then I would go to school, and put on a big pot of coffee at 13, 14 years old. So,
Yeah. But 48 teams. They all need a base of operations somewhere. Hopefully, one of them trains. There are only 48 states here.
there are, yeah, they could each pick
They can each pick one.
Not sure
Chris wants to adopt the
bring Croatia here.
Croatia here.
Yeah, Chris, we're bringing Croatia here. You'll see this in a couple weeks here. So,
Instead of putting them in 16s in Texas or something,
I'm sure
they should give a team to every state.
Team to every state, and
I
then
don't
they
know who's gonna
adopt
get
that.
Idaho, but that'd be kind of Wyoming.
Exactly. The travel dynamics of that may be a little bit interesting for each of their
It's going to
games.
be bad anyway.
It will be. It will be. Yeah. But hey, the 94 World Cup was a massive springboard for the sport,
It was.
and what we have coming up, not just with the World Cup in men's, but we also have the Copa America this summer. We have the FIFA Club World Cup in 2025. We have the Coup de Grace in 26. Then we have 27, potentially. They're still working on the bid for the women's. They're either 27 or 31. And then we also have LA Olympics in 2028, where there's some soccer as well. I mean, that slate is just almost, I think the closest one would be Brazil, but almost unprecedented in terms of that run that close with the level of tournament there. And that's just going to do wonders for the
Soccer's
sport.
already growing sport here in the U.S.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible. But thank you for talking about that with the economics of the TV revenue. I think, for those, I mean, we could do a whole other podcast, just an entire show and series, and there are out there on the economics of football. Soccernomics is a great book if anybody is piqued their interest and they want to learn more. But essentially, there's 3 main buckets other than selling and buying players. That's more on the soccer operations side, which is a revenue source for teams. But there's essentially commercial, which is, for all intents and purposes, sponsorship revenue. There's broadcast, so TV deals. And then there's match day, which is tickets and all your food and bev while you're there, and the hospitality and that kind of thing. So those are your 3 main buckets. And, what you and I were talking about before we got on to record here, that, it used to be in the maybe the great heyday, if we want to say that, even as, near as 20 years ago, where match day really mattered to some of those bigger global clubs and mega clubs now. in terms of their revenue source. And it's not to say that they don't matter. They're just a much smaller percentage in terms of their overall revenue model, because as the leagues have become more popular, as technology has accelerated, globalization in general, has impacted business across the world in almost every single sector. And football's been no different. And what that's done is driven awareness, driven higher revenue for TV deals, for sponsorship deals and merch sales and all those things. So what we've seen is an evolution over time, in particular from like the late 90s to now, and especially now, is where match day used to be maybe 40-50% of these clubs' revenue model. And now it's, 10-15%, maybe 20% at most, where commercial and broadcast almost share that, the balance of it.
Yeah, situation like my club, Manchester United, where the roof leaks care because the stadium's still sold out, and that's not their major revenue source.
Exactly. Well, you could also talk about their ownership group and all that fun stuff, and but that's also another episode worthy. But yeah, you've seen that evolution and revenue models change, especially as technology and other forces change. But that's certainly been the case for at least, kind of the top 5 leagues in the top flight. Again, another good source for people are the Deloitte Football Money League is public and out there. It goes into it, as well as KPMG Football Benchmark is another really good one. But there's, for the soccer nerds like myself that love to get into that stuff, those are out there for you guys to look at.
Talking about community, I think probably, Wrexham will eventually not be just a community team because of the investment and the TV attention. But, the first season of it, you got to see how that team was integrated into, so that's what you're thinking about,
Exactly.
Go lower down the leagues. You think of a community sporting institution. They don't have a whole lot like it here in the U.S. per se, where like that is the community's hub for activity on the weekend, for example. Some smaller towns you might think of high school football games,
right,
and egg games being that
and egg
community driver. But it's what soccer at the lower leagues anyway in other countries is like. It's the place where you go hang out with your friends. It's a community. You see the same people at weekend. It's a easy commitment to make. 2 hours. You're done.
It's not 3.5
I have some before and afters.
Exactly.
Had a wonderful time for a brief period between 1 and 5 p.m. in the afternoon on a Saturday, and then you can go about the rest of your lives.
Exactly. Yeah, and that is going to be. It won't be exactly the same model, but it's going to be more to what we aspire to be, is a community grassroots-based club and ingrained and rooted in the NWA community. And so I think that's what you see starting to pop up with the growth of USL, is a little bit more of that model, which is, for folks like you and I that can appreciate that and soccer down the pyramid and what it used to be and those kinds of things, I think. It's not to say that the mega clubs don't do stuff in their community. They do, and they make a big impact. It's just it's how they've evolved, and it's just different now, and that's okay. It's just different. And so, we've talked about it a little bit, but us bringing a club here, we don't have to go crazy granular, but broad strokes. How do you think? What are you excited about in terms of what that potential could be in terms of impact to NWA? And it doesn't have to be economically. It could be just otherwise, things to do, increasing diversity in how we interact with each other across our different communities, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I think it's, probably the biggest contribution to Northwest Arkansas would be having another great amenity here, especially one that is a growing sport. It is not a major sport in the U.S. yet. We could argue
if we're honest,
but
after 2026, we will be.
2026, we will be. So, but it has its own form of community, and I think it's some of that, even with the MLS clubs. I've been to some Kansas City and stuff, and look at their fan section. the culture
The
they
blue
have.
cauldron. Yep.
It's different, right? I mean, it's different than going to an NFL game or a baseball game, which is like a lot more relaxed and things of that nature. So I think having this kind of an amenity where you can go, you're there for the game.
Yeah.
The game is part of the entertainment, but it's not necessarily the most important. I mean, you are watching the game, but like you're there for the, hanging out with your friends for an hour before, an hour after, and during the game as well. So, and there's a period of intense activity that you watch the field, scream, and take a break for 15 minutes, and come back and
scream and yell again. And
go about, doing something else after that. So I think that's, it would be a great cultural asset to have here.
Absolutely.
And a way for people to meet new people, make new friends, talking to people around Northwest Arkansas that move here, I often talk about, oh, well, I don't know anybody here. How do I meet new friends? This is another one of those opportunities that people have to make new friends, meet new people.
It is. And the community that's built around soccer and what that sport does. All sports do it. It's just differently. But soccer in particular.
I think it's intense. I've watched a lot of different.
You have, yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's because it's compressed.
It could be, yeah.
It's high highs, low lows.
It is very. Yeah, we don't play in the middle. We play at the highs and the opposite end on the spectrum. And I think that's something that promotion relegation does, and that's what adds to each individual game and the importance of it. I've talked about that on previous episodes as well, but. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Mervin, and thank you for the work that you and your center do, and all of your colleagues, and the impact that you guys are having on Northwest Arkansas and Arkansas as an entire state, and your thought leadership. So thank you so much for that work and for joining us here today. So really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And just a reminder to our listeners, thank you guys. And you can find us on all platforms at Pitch to Pro or USL Arkansas, and go check out the website for more info. Until